Welcome to TINAH Talks, where time is not a healer, but we believe that we all have the power to heal ourselves and take our own mental well-being into our own hands. This podcast is a byproduct of TINAH's mental well-being marketplace and community platform at timeisnotahealer.com, providing you with the best products for your self-healing journey. Hit subscribe and follow us on socials if you want support on your mental well-being journey. We're your hosts, Sophie and Kelsey. This episode is all about anxiety and why am I so anxious all the time? I know it's a
Uh,
problem that both of us can relate to.
yes, absolutely. The anxiety runs strong with these ones.
Yeah, it sure does. How do we want to start this? Do we want to start by sharing our own personal battles with anxiety?
Well, I mean, I suppose it's Christmas time, holiday time. Have you had any holiday anxiety? It's right on cue.
Right on cue. Do you know what? This time, no. But when I'm in the UK, yes, because I think anxiety around like the holiday period is pretty normal, right? Because
Yeah.
there's so much pressure. And one thing I was thinking about, so this Christmas I spent it in Ecuador in a very different way than I would normally spend it if I was in the UK. And I realised that in the UK we put so much pressure on Christmas. There's such a big pressure around what presents you buy people, such a big pressure around who you're spending Christmas with. What are you doing for Christmas? It's a whole day affair. Whereas here, it's like presents are a bit of an afterthought. Not an afterthought, but like you don't. They're not so much pressure. You don't have to buy the most expensive gift for everybody.
Right.
It could be like don't buy it on Christmas Eve kind of thing, and that would be okay. And the
Yeah.
shopping malls aren't crazy packed with people because not everyone's like panic buying Christmas presents.
Yeah.
And there's way less pressure because it's not a whole day affair. It's like you spend it on Christmas Eve, and actually Christmas Day is a bit more chill. So there was way less pressure, which I felt way less anxiety about. Like when I'm in the UK and it's the holiday periods, the whole lead up to Christmas, there's so much pressure to go to the party, buy the nicest dress, go to like all of the Christmas markets, do all of the Christmassy things. And that is obviously
Right.
a massive driver for anxiety, especially if you already struggle with anxiety on a daily or weekly basis. But how about you? How did you
Yeah.
find it this year?
Well, this year was a bit different for me. I mean, as you know, but the viewers don't know, I had a couple big losses in my family. My mom passed less than 6 months ago, and then 2 months before that, my grandma passed, her mother. So it was just a lot of loss. And it's interesting, like I did fine with Thanksgiving, like I didn't have any issues. And then I leading up to Christmas, I've been way more anxious. I can tell because my cortisol levels must be super high because when it comes to like bedtime, and I'm like a pretty religious sleeper. I love my sleep. But it'll come to bedtime. I'm up at like 7 in the morning and I work I work during the day and I work out and I like try to do all the things that take care of myself. But come the evening, I'm like wide awake. I'm like, bing. So like I'm not necessarily having like the hardcore, anxiety attacks or things like that. But I have a lot of tension in my body and I've had a really hard time like relaxing and like settling down at the end of my days. And I also personally have not been in the Christmas mood. Like I haven't necessarily wanted to celebrate. And so I go into like a functional freeze is what they call it. So I can tell like my anxiety is bad because non in my what's supposed to be like my downtime or just in between time. So like if I'm not working, I don't have meetings or in between transition from work to dinner or whatever, I'm like watching a crap ton of TV. That's like my biggest coping mechanism that sometimes is maladaptive. Um, so yeah, anxiety has been running high on this side
Um,
for
I,
the
I can get that.
holidays.
I do the same at the moment with scrolling. I think I get myself in these little scroll holes, and I'm not a scroller. Like I don't spend a lot of time on Instagram, TikTok, or anything like that. Like it doesn't interest me that much. But obviously, other than for business.
Yeah.
but lately, definitely, I have been scrolling, and it's a procrastination technique, right? Like it's like, oh, I don't really want to go and face maybe the realities of something, so you kind of focus your attention elsewhere, which for you would be more with like the TV, for example.
Yeah. I think like so I'm sure everyone like knows fight, flight, freeze, fawn kind of thing. But for all of us like high functioning anxiety people, like we function, we do well. We can show up, we cook, we clean. A lot of us high functioning anxiety people clean a fuck ton. We like show up and do work and we're like go-getters at work kind of thing. But so that's why they call it the functional freeze, but it's like in that in between space when you could be doing something that you would enjoy, right? Like spending time
Yeah.
with loved ones or working on crafts or going and doing a new like sport or exercise or whatever it is that you like to do for fun and just like enjoying your downtime. The freeze part is where you're just kind of like frozen and you can't really take on anything else. You can't process a whole lot. And so yeah, you just get absorbed, like where you have like that you're doing something, but you're shut down. Like you don't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be engaged with scrolling or binge watching TV and that kind of thing. And so that's where more so on the functional free side than like procrastinating, I would say.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing the shit that I need to
You
do.
do. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And it's just, I guess sometimes you don't even realize that you're doing it, and then you're like a couple of hours in and you're like, oh, what have I been
Oh,
doing? So that time has just passed.
yeah, I did. It took me a couple of days to realize that my anxiety was really high. Like I think I mean, if you were to like rewind 7 years ago, I, taking care of yourself, managing your mental well-being is a process. It's a journey, and I really had to like learn first how to identify, like, oh shit, I'm experiencing like low grade moderate depression, or oh, I'm having a severe like major depressive episode because I also have depression, or it's like, oh, my anxiety is super high right now. Like, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? So it took a while for me to like first get aware and like recognize what was happening in my body, and then to understand like what were the behaviors that came with that. And
Yeah.
then to know, okay, what's the best way to cope with this or to allow myself to feel my feelings without getting like stuck or trapped where I was at. Several years ago, I didn't know a lot of those things. And now I'm like very aware. Like I've been someone who, I don't know about you, I think this is a thing with people who sometimes struggle with mental health issues. I sometimes don't trust my gut, or a long time ago, I had a hard time even recognizing my gut feelings, like knowing, like, oh, that's my gut telling me something, and then trusting what it was telling me. And I think it's kind of the same concept. It took me a while to realize, like, oh, what I'm feeling in my body right now is anxiety, is overwhelm,
100%.
is stress.
Yeah, I know it does, and it takes a long time to figure that out. But I remember, like when I was living in England, um, I would wake up more or less every day with a stomping chest feeling, like someone was stamping
Mhm.
my chest, and I was always like, "What's wrong with me? Like, why am I waking up with this feeling every day? Like, I don't understand it. Doesn't make any sense. Like, it's not. No one is stamping on my chest. Is it physical pain? Am I dying? Like, what is this? What is this pain?" So it took me a really long time to be like, okay, that's a byproduct of anxiety. Like
Yeah.
that's how it's presenting in my body, and my body's trying to tell me that either I'm like I'm too fast right now, because I used to live. I've spoken about this in other episodes, but I used to live literally like 100 miles an hour, and I didn't have any kind
Yeah.
of balance in between, and I would just be constantly go go go, doing a million and one things at once. I'd even wake up and like even be multitasking as I'm getting ready, kind of thing, like doing just like too much, and that was my body presenting to me, slow the fuck down,
Yeah.
basically. Um, but we don't recognize it until most people don't recognize it until they're at breaking point, and that's the scary part, because
Yeah.
that's when you really, really do need to do something about it, because otherwise, who knows what situations you're going to get yourself into. But for me, I remember, like, particularly in my early 20s, I think I've always had anxiety, but I didn't necessarily know that that
Right.
was what it was. And it's presented itself in different formats for me and throughout my life. But I think, particularly in my early 20s, I drank a lot to cope with it, or
Yeah.
like I would party a lot to deal with it. And I think
Yeah.
that's when I see that in quite a lot of people now still.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's really interesting. Now I don't really do, I don't, I'm not sober, but I don't really drink very often,
Hmm.
because I know that it actually fuels my anxiety. So yeah, how did you come about like realizing your symptoms and then realizing like the behaviors that were associated with that?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I hit breaking points. That's like what they were breaking points for me. I mean, we've discussed it in other episodes, but like I didn't have the easiest of upbringings, and I was on my own at 16, and then I think a big breaking point for me with anxiety was my dad. He was really sick. He ended up having end stage liver failure due to drinking, and how I found out, because alcoholics tend to be a little bit secretive about things. I was living in another state because I went to school in Wisconsin, and so he was in Illinois. So I would see him, but I didn't see him as often. And I found out via call at 3 a.m. that he was in the ICU, and like he wasn't supposed to make it out of the ICU at that point. That's like how far along he was with the end stage failure. And after that, I started having anxiety attacks. I mean, like I went down to Illinois and all that stuff, and then I had to go back because I was working. But I noticed that I would have like the functional freeze. That's when I learned, I think, the first time what functional freeze was. It was either like I would go to work, I would handle my shit at work, I would do the things I needed to do. But when I was at home, and I worked at a hospital, so I'd have days off like during the middle of the week, and like I'd want to do all these things. Like I'd want to go work out, I'd want to like, do errands or whatever it was, and I couldn't seem to get myself to do stuff. I would compulsively clean my apartment, and then I would lay on the couch and I'd binge watch Netflix all the way until like 9 p.m., and then I would feel worse, like I hadn't done anything. And in between that, I would have like crying kind of anxiety attacks. And I just like remember it was very intense, and I was like, okay, so this is, something's not right. And so I think that's the first time I learned. And for those who don't know, I used to work in the psych field, right? So like I've had a lot of training. I worked with people in a inpatient psychiatric unit setting, so they were very far along. So when things started happening, I was able to recognize like the big stuff. I was like, oh, this is what's happening right now. But it was like the subtle symptoms of like the stomach aches, the tension in my body and in my jaw, the not being able to sleep, like the really subtle things that I didn't pick up on before. And it was like I got to a breaking point. I recognized it and was like, okay, what do I need to work on to like better this? And then with depression, unfortunately, I have been told I've had moderate depression a lot of my life. But my first major depressive episode was after my dad passed. And being that I worked in the psych field, I recognized those symptoms right away. I was having intrusive suicidal thoughts. I'm someone who's very social, and I like talk a lot with people, and I couldn't like handle conversations anymore, and I was starting to not be my normal organized self at work. And so that's when I went to the doctor to get help, and I got on meds for a period of time to like kind of pull me out of the really dark spot I was in as I was working on other aspects. But like now I recognize, like, because of those breaking points, I like thought about what led up to, like, what was I doing behavioral wise leading up to those moments. And now I pay attention. I know that if I start binge watching Grey's Anatomy, buckle up, baby. I'm in it for, I'm either having really high anxiety or I'm potentially going into a depressive episode, because I like, it's a show that makes me cry, and it's super dramatic and heartfelt, and oh, it fucks me up. But like I know,
Yeah.
like if I start doing that, that it's like I'm not, I'm feeling a sort of way. So I
Yeah.
started paying attention to stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah. I have something similar in the sense of I often lose my memory.
Oh yeah.
If I, well, there's two things for me. There's one, I lose my memory, so I'm very bad at like just remembering silly little things like what I did yesterday, or like what did I wear last night. Like I can't.
Yep.
It's like stupid things that I should really be able to
Mm-hmm.
remember. So if I start feeling like if I'm forgetting things, I'm like shit. Okay, like I'm obviously either anxious or I've got like an overwhelm of stress or something. The other thing is when I don't reply to people or messages. It usually means I'm overwhelmed. I'm not necessarily anxious about the messages that they sent me, but it's because I've just got too much going on processing in my brain. I
Yeah.
can't show up for these people right now, so I just don't. I just
Yeah.
ignore the world, and that happens quite a lot. And like that's, if I do that on an extreme level, that's generally, I'm like, oh, okay, that's the sign that I need to start doing something differently, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think memory is a big one. I have a friend who like I know when she's super anxious, she'll do something, like she'll pull something out of the fridge, or she'll do something, and then she'll be like, "Oh, did you do that?" And I'm like, "No, that was you." But it's like small things that start to kind of like fall through the cracks. Because I mean, like they say, right? Anxiety is you're living in the future, you're worrying about the future, so you're not in the present. And depression is that you're ruminating or worrying about the past. So again, you're not in the present. And so it's in those present moments that like, where is it that you're kind of detached from like everyday things? And those are really like what are we doing to excessively detach, I think, are big cues.
Yeah, it's true. And I think a lot of people don't even realize that those symptoms are anxiety. So this might even be like hearing this might be the first sign of somebody being like, oh, maybe I'm actually experiencing anxiety because I have some of those symptoms. And I think we found ourselves in a bit of an anxiety epidemic, if you like, but a lot of people don't even realize that they're in it.
Yeah.
But then you can see the behaviors that we're talking about present, and you're like, well, we kind of are, but a lot of
Yeah.
people won't either don't want to accept it or don't realize because they don't realize that those symptoms are associated because they could also be associated with other things, right? Like it's not necessarily these symptoms are isolated to anxiety, but so many people, particularly after the pandemic, have found themselves in a position where they're like, I'm an anxious person, and maybe they
Yeah.
haven't experienced that before. And like the first time of experiencing anxiety, it's quite scary. You don't know what it is. You don't know
Yeah.
how it feels. But why do you think we found ourselves in that situation? Like, why are we now so many people experiencing anxiety? Is it because that we now speak more about mental health? Like previously in our older generations, it wasn't a thing. It was like kind of
Right.
that don't talk about your problems. That was kind of
Yeah.
the mindset. Like, do you think that's maybe why, or do you think it is that we've now got more things to be anxious about?
Well, I think it's a combination, right? Like, so if you like look at statistics, it's probably a combination of, right, in the past, people didn't talk about it. Like it was still happening, it just wasn't talked about. And so now it's a little bit more open. And ideally, with conversations like this, it continues to be like less stigmatized. But I do think a huge part of it is kind of the advancement of technology. So, like, we are so connected now. We walk around with these things in our hand all the time. It's constant little dopamine hits, which like burns you out. But like we're constantly connected. And that's not how we used to be in the past. But you have messages to respond to. You've got Instagram, TikTok reels, or whatever that you need to like go through and send to friends and see what friends have sent to you. And we're just, I think we're bombarded a lot more easily with constant information and constant things like from TV and the news, from YouTube to the social media apps on our phone. And I think because we have like that constant, it's like a constant heightened state of arousal. I think that feeds our anxiety. And I think only just now, in my opinion, and I think more so for the younger generations, are we starting to learn how to actually like cope with our emotions. So like one, be aware of them, then cope with them and deal with them, and then move through them in a healthy way. And I think just the rate at which like I would say, I don't know if I can do this right on the computer, but the rate at which the like technology has like really connected all of us and we're constantly having access to everything, our ability to like cope and like deal with our emotions has been a much slower kind of rate. And so it's just gone very fast. And I think that's why, we're finding, and then, throw the pandemic on top of it, having to isolate some people to put yourself back out into a big old world when you haven't been engaged in it for a really long time can be really overwhelming and can feed underlying anxious symptoms that you had previously that you weren't aware of.
Yeah,
So
for sure. I think it's yeah, we just have to access to too much knowledge almost now. It's like,
just
okay, boom, look on your phone, you
too
can find
much.
out the news of anywhere in the world. Like, boom, look on your
Yeah.
phone, you're in constant, instant communication with anybody you want to speak to. Like, that's actually quite overwhelming. And if you don't have the right, what's the word, like approach to those things. Like if you are addicted to looking at the news, for example, the news bombards us with a lot of negativity. So it's quite natural for you to then take on and absorb that negativity and you'll start thinking all sorts of different patterns of or things
Yeah.
around what you see. Um, and I think, yeah, it's just too available now. Like the things that we have
Yeah.
access to, everything's just too available. And then, like exactly what you've just said, like we haven't caught up yet. We don't know how to process that. Technology's gone like this, and we're way behind it. So
Yeah.
that's like we're playing chase basically. We're playing catch up with the technology that's available to us. It wasn't the world wasn't designed like this initially. Like we weren't programmed like that as when we
Yeah.
were children. Like growing up, that's not how we. I think it'll be different for people that have grown up with it. Like we're obviously in like the
Right.
millennial generation. So I think millennial and even some Gen Z maybe like it's still like, we're obviously used to it now, we still can process it, but it's still like a thing. Whereas if you're, I don't know what the generation even is called right now, but like if you've grown up like literally with a smartphone in your hand from when you're like 5 years old, obviously you're going to be a bit more attuned to it, right?
Yeah, well, now I like, and right, I'm slightly removed from the psych field these days, so I'm like not totally up to date, but like 6 years ago, there was new like therapy based practices that were coming about for teens because of the constant interaction on phones. So because kids have been exposed to technology and like phones from such a young age, it's actually increased their anxiety levels more, and now there's a need for therapeutic counseling on how to manage that,
Um,
like a whole new subsect for younger kids around that. I remember I was dating someone, this was back in college, and his younger sister, she was just going into high school and she was struggling with anxiety, and a lot of it had to do around her phone. And like, that was a big thing. And then that's when I started like talking to like other people in my practice and stuff from working in the psych field. And they're like, yeah, like it's a whole new subsect that's popping up because from a young age, like, because you're just getting this constant dopamine that like
yeah,
hits you, and it fucks up your natural levels. Just like if you take any supplements for things, your body is not able to naturally produce, and it throws us kind of off balance. And so I don't think like, yeah, kids are more tech savvy because they're introduced to it from a young age, but I think definitely not been it's not been helpful for their mental wellness, for their mental health.
mm, yeah. But I guess the on the flip side to that, they will have the tools earlier on in life to handle it.
Yeah.
Whereas we had to learn, we had to go backwards and figure it out.
Yes.
Whereas they're going to have it from day one. And I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I think actually they're growing up in a time where it's like it's been spoken about. Like they're getting solutions to things. So I think that's actually one of the positives that could come out of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the younger generation has been more vocal about like their feelings and their experiences. And so that's like what's bringing about like kind of a mental health oriented society, or at least I hope that's the direction that we're being pushed, because
Yeah,
too many of us are just overwhelmed, overworked, and unhappy and unfulfilled.
for
And
sure.
that's just going to lead to an even greater epidemic around
Yeah,
mental health.
for sure. And for anybody that's like, I guess that one thing that you feel when you have anxiety is that you're losing control of your mind, right?
Yeah.
And like, because it can, like, you have all of these like spiraling thoughts, and it's like things are confused and a bit difficult to navigate. Like, what would our top tips be for anyone to try and take back control of their mind, or how it might feel anyway?
Yeah, gosh. I mean, so like there's so many different things that you can do, but I think like, because you don't want to contribute to your anxiety, you want to have like just small practices that are really easy to show up for. So the biggest thing for me is nervous system management. Like, how can I make myself feel super super grounded in the moment? And there are all sorts of different practices for that. Like for me, I do square breathing for 5 minutes a day. That helps me to kind of trigger my parasympathetic nervous state, which is that relaxed state, to help me consciously. It's a conscious activation of going from like aroused in that autonomic nervous system where that's where we experience fight, flight, freeze, all of those things. And I'm consciously practicing how can I like connect with my breath within my body and bring myself to that style of breathing triggers your parasympathetic nervous system, which is that relaxed part. So I think that's a really solid practice, just really simple, deep breathing, deep belly breathing practices. For some people who focusing on breath, it can make them really, really anxious. There are other practices that you could do, like cold water exposure is really, really helpful. I also do that one, like the first thing in the morning, I just do cold water on my face. And that's really, really helpful, just to kind of like recenter and reground in the moment. I know a big one is putting cold water on your wrists. That can help recenter and ground in the moment. A really simple practice, like if you're in a excuse me, true panic, is the five senses, right? So can you name five things that you see in your environment? Can you name 4 things that you hear? Can you name 3 things that you can touch, right? I think I'm going out of order here, right? I think it's because like so I think it's 5 things you can touch, 4 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste, like in the moment, and trying to kind of ground into that present moment. So I would say things like that can be really helpful, just really simplistic grounding practices.
Makes sense. I think for me, the biggest thing was breathing and turning my notifications off. I turned my notifications off on my phone a long time ago,
Oh
and
yeah.
that I'm not looking at my phone in the morning. Like the first thing I do in my day is not look at my phone. Like I hate
Yeah.
it. I noticed it last week actually. Like I had a 7 a.m. call or something like that, and I wanted to double check before the call that no one had cancelled or like whatever. And normally I don't look at my phone. I normally wake up, go to the bathroom, do what I need to do, brush my teeth, go outside, do like a little meditation, do some yoga, do exercise, whatever, and then I'll look at my phone. But on this particular day, I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. to do all those things. So
Yeah.
I woke up maybe like 20 minutes before my call, got ready, sat down at my desk, looked at my phone to double check, and the difference in my mood was insane. Like the rest of the day, I was in a bit of a grump. Whereas,
Yeah.
like, and I could tell it was because I was immediately switching myself on and
Yeah.
immediately looking at my phone, looking at my messages and thinking, oh my God, I need to reply to this and do this and do that. And then my mind goes spiraling. But I remember listening to, I think it was a Jay Shetty podcast. And
Okay.
he was saying that, like, in the morning, you need to put your armor on as if you're going to war. And, like, having like practices like breath work or meditation
Yeah.
or fitness, whatever, and not looking at your phone as the first thing you do is like
Yep.
you put in your armor on for the day, and then you're ready to like tackle any tasks or challenges that might come at you throughout the day, and then you're obviously going to be in a better mood for it. So turning my notifications off. So I'm now in control, because I think when you have notifications on, you're out of control. People can message you at any
Right.
time of day, and it's up to them when they drop in like a little bomb into your day. Whereas
Yep.
actually now I'm in control of when I want to see those messages, and I'm in control of when I want to look at my phone. And I set myself up to do that. Like I think it
Yeah.
requires boundaries, and boundary setting is another episode we can go into, but definitely you need to have the boundary to say, this isn't my priority. This is going to set me off on the wrong foot for the day, and turn off notifications, stop looking at your phone. I think that's been a really big player in me not waking up every day with anxiety, honestly, because I used to literally wake up, first thing I do, get myself in a little scroll hole.
Yeah.
Not healthy.
I love that scroll hole. It's just a little I think this was like a really popular meme or something. It was like, we human beings, we're basically houseplants with complicated emotions. And what that makes me think of in terms of like how to better manage your anxiety on a daily basis. And these are things that I do for myself, and then I actually push for my clients for my high performance coaching, is 3 things, right? If we're houseplants, it's the same thing. You need water, you need sunlight, and you need oxygen. And so the typical things that like, and then right, the idea is there's no phone. No phone exists in that realm for that house plant. So like when you wake up, you chug a glass of water, you immediately try to get like 5 minutes of sunlight on your eyeballs, right, to help with the circadian rhythms that you have happening. And then oxygen, doing like some deep breathing with some meditation and just kind of grounding into your roots, basically. And I think that's like that should be a freaking t-shirt or something, right?
Yeah.
Like, right,
I
take
will
that
get
meme,
that
put it
TINAH
on
Max.
there, and on the back, here's your 3 best coping mechanisms for the day. Start with some sunshine, water, and some oxygen. um
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, that's those are really solid practices. But I think I agree with you. I haven't had my notifications on for years. I mean, I've got some notifications that I have turned on, but like I other than that, but like the actual dings and the sound, like it will populate on my phone for certain apps, but I don't have any of my social media stuff turned on, none of that. And the sound is always off. Now, granted, like if I had kids or something, that's a different story, but I mean, you can adjust what has the sound on versus doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, there's going to be more things that are important to you than others, but let's say Instagram's never going to be urgent.
No,
It's
never.
So, like, I think it is really important that you take note of how you feel. And like someone said this to me, I don't know if someone said it to me, I read it or if I listened to it, whatever. But it was like, take note of how you feel after you leave a certain situation, after you leave a certain person, after you've done a certain action, and you will soon start to realize which one of those make you anxious. Because if you're reading the news every morning and you're literally struggling with anxiety as soon as you wake up to the minute you go to bed, probably those thoughts subconsciously are just like generating around in your head. So I think it's really important to like take stock of like your environment, things that you're doing and how they're making you feel. And then you can start to do the process of elimination and see what doesn't work for you anymore. Because what worked for you maybe 2 years ago, things have changed, life's changing quite quickly, and it might not work for you anymore. So you constantly have to start analyzing your own situation and adapting to make it fit for you.
Yeah, actually, like, I love that you say like things change and sometimes you have to adjust your own routine and schedule. I noticed for myself, right? So, like, starting my own healing journey, a big part of it was I wanted to utilize exercise for my anxiety. I knew I needed to like burn that energy. I needed to move my body. And I used to have a really hard time getting into any sort of exercise routine, right? Because like there's the competition between anxiety and depression. And the depression just wanted me to like lay and be a couch potato versus like the anxiety of like, oh my God, I have to get up and do something. And I know that body movement is good for both of those things, but it's like, how the fuck do you get yourself up to do that? And so I started really, really small. And this was like, multiple years ago. And it would be like, I'm just going to work out for 15 minutes, floor exercises, 30 minutes, and then like that kind of thing. And for me, it had started off with these very small practices in the afternoon. And then I wanted to get into yoga because I really enjoyed yoga when I was younger. And so I kind of got back into it and like that upped my fitness level, which is great. Now, this year, actually, this has been the biggest change. My business has grown quite a bit and I find that I'm quite busy. Like once my day gets going, I'm doing stuff and I'm on the go. And by the afternoon, when I would typically work out, I would be like, I'm too deep in doing like client stuff, my own on the business things. And I started to find that my exercise regimen was slipping. So I was like, well, crap. Like I know it feels good for me. I can tell on the days that I don't exercise that my anxiety is higher. And so I had to adjust my routine. And I was like, I'm gonna have to try to see if I can like work out in the morning. And I'm not a morning person. And I was like, all right, let's just try it for a couple of days. I went back to the baby steps. Let's just, try a little bit. And then I did. And of course, I was like, crap. I actually really enjoy working out in the morning. And now I've had to shift that so it fits better with my life, but it still gives me the support that I need, just for what's going on in my body and my anxiety and all of that. So now I'm a freaking morning workout person. So
Love it. Me too. Join the club. I can't work out in the morning or the evening either. Like I feel like if I work out in the morning, it just sets me up for the day.
yeah.
And I'm too lazy. By the time it gets to 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I'm like, I can't be bothered. It's the moment's gone. I'm a lazy person, like at heart, but I force myself to do things. And yeah, it has to be a morning workout or no workout. Otherwise, this is not happening. But I can really tell the difference if I don't do it on a day, like not every day, obviously, there's going to be exceptions to when I've got the other things going on, but um, try to at least incorporate some kind of movement in my morning, at least. Like
Yeah.
today, I haven't got any workout, but I did go for a little walk this morning. One of the first things I
Yeah.
did. And even that is like enough sometimes just to set the tone of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess maybe like before we wrap up, I'd say what is the easiest way for you to get your anxiety under control?
Treat yourself like a plant. Going with
What'd you
your
say?
treat yourself like a plant. Going with your advice. Treat yourself like a plant. Give yourself water. Give yourself sunlight, and give yourself what's the one? Oxygen, breath work. I
Mm-hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about
And if
you?
you're I mean, I'd have to say the same. I would say like back in the day when I was like getting into stuff, because people are always like, meditation is great for anxiety. Meditation is one of the hardest things you can start with to like
Totally.
manage your anxiety. And for me, it was like I needed to get out of my mind and that was helpful to do intensive exercise, like things like high intensity interval training and stuff like that, which I learned later on doing that all the time is not good for you. But I would say like if you're someone who like you need to like get going, exercise is a great option. Or if you have a hard time getting yourself going, breath work is the best alternative to
Yeah.
it. And
It
then
doesn't need to
the
be
rest of
long.
it is
Just 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes.
fine. And It makes a huge
Different.
difference. A lot of my clients, that's one of the first like nervous system things that we start with. And I'm like, look, you might not feel it right in the beginning, but if you do this consistently for 2 weeks, I promise you it'll make a difference. And every
Yeah,
single one of them comes back and they're like, yeah, it was a game changer. Like if I stick
different.
with it, I can feel the difference that it makes for me. And I'm like, yeah, it's really helpful. So I would say like depending on where you're at, if you're stuck or your approach, like some sort of body movement, breath work, and the rest of it is remember you're a plant. You need water and you need sunlight.
Yeah, literally. Remember you're a plant. And what was I just going to say? I just saw something as you said that, but I think I've got it. Yeah, I think if movement is going to be a game changer, and everybody we forget the basics sometimes. The basics is treating
Yeah.
yourself like a plant. That is literally the most basic thing that you could possibly do, and hopefully that kind of sets you on the tone. But exactly what you said, like meditation is the hardest thing to
Oh
start
God.
with. Like, that is not like, obviously, yes, meditation is great. It's been a game changer for me for sure, but I
Yeah.
had to learn. You know, asked me like 3 4 years ago, could I sit there and meditate for like more than a
Oh
second?
no.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So yeah, I think that's kind of it for the episode today. Unless you've got anything else to add.
No, I think big takeaway, treat yourself like a plant. Take that's all we have around anxiety. But if that's all good, I'll close us out. So yeah, thank you guys for listening to our episode today. If this resonated with you, be sure to give us a like, and we would love to hear your feedback in the comments about what topics you'd like to hear more about. And don't forget to subscribe and follow us on socials and join the community at timeisnotahealer.com. All the details can be found in the episode description below. And remember, you hold the power to heal. Until next time, you've got this.